G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here, 22nd of November, first Moondog.
On the moon. First dog on the moon. Good morning, Moneypenny. Is he in? Hello. You've changed, Moneypenny.
Ah, there you are, OON.
Morning, sir.
Just in time, OON. Q wants to show you a new device he's developed. It's a high-powered supercomputer, but it's only as big as a packet of cigarettes, and it tells the time.
Like my iPhone, sir.
Well, yes, I suppose it might be. iPhone, you say? So it makes phone calls as well?
Yes, sir. I have a space grey one.
Put this back in its crate and take it back, Q. OON, give it here. Don't! And disable that ejector app, Q. Right. Well, anyway, OON, we've got a spot of bother. You see this?
Ah, it's a large piece of paper full of colourful shapes and lots of writing at odd angles, sir.
It's a map, OON.
Oh, of course, sir.
Now, this here.
The coffee stain, sir.
No, that's New Zealand, just to the left.
The big pink smeary bit.
Yes, OON, that's Australia. It's one of ours. Now, thing is, OON, there's been a coup.
A coop, sir? With chickens?
No, OON, the P is silent.
Oh, just like Her Majesty's, sir.
Quite. Now, it appears that evil Dr. Turnback has taken over the entire country and nobody even noticed.
Oh, it must have been on Half-Price Tuesday, sir.
Well, perhaps, OON. Either way, Australia has replaced its Prime Minister and nobody batted an eye.
Just like that, sir?
Yes, just like that, OON. We only found out about it when several knighthoods came back, returned to sender.
Golly, sir, they can't depose a first-term Prime Minister. That's unthinkable.
Highly undemocratic, OON, you're right, but they do it all the time.
But democracy is a treasured institution, sir. Normally, folks wander down to the local primary school on a sunny Saturday morning hand in hand. They draw a penis on their ballot, stuff it into a cardboard box and eat a sausage and some bread. It's a triumph of the human spirit, sir.
Well, maybe, OON, and yes, the penis vote was very influential in their last election, but that's all over. There's a new man in charge, and there hasn't really been a peep. Everyone seems quite relieved, even though, well, and this is the bit that really has us worried, OON, even though nothing has changed.
I see, sir. Do you think that...
I don't know, OON. We need you to get to the bottom of it. We suspect evil Dr. Turnback has put something in the water. He hasn't changed a single meaningful policy, but he seems to have taken over an entire country, using complex sentence structure, a string of semicolons and a dangling modifier.
But surely some things are going on as usual, sir. Asylum seekers are still dying. Huge mines still being approved against sensible environmental and economic advice.
Well, yes, OON, but that's just it. Nothing's different, and yet everything's changed, you see? It has all the trademarks.
Not.
Yes.
Sphincter, sir.
Yes, OON, special protective hospitality for immigrants now coming to ruin everything.
Oh, they'll stop at nothing, sir.
They can't be turned back, OON. OON?
Yes, sir?
We need you to infiltrate Sphincter.
Oh, dear, not again, sir.
Sorry, OON, but it has to be done.
All right, I'll get to the bottom of it.
Next week.
Do you expect me to talk, Turnback?
No, OON. I expect you to die.
Tune in next Sunday for part 2 of First Dog on the Moon in Sphincter.
Oh, that's very silly. And that's it for our Sunday Extra this week. Don't forget to work on your...
Yeah. Okay. I'm a pacifist. That means I condemn all war. It means I think all warriors have made a grievous mistake. I don't think that Australia's warriors are good and Australia's warriors' enemies are bad. I think killing is bad. I'm pretty sure that everybody who fought on all sides during World War I or World War II or Korea, They all thought that their side was right, their side was noble, their side was honourable, that if they did happen to manage to break the Geneva Conventions, you know, and like take shotguns onto the battlefield like the Americans do, or attack civilians, you know, and cook 43,000 hamburgers in one night in 1943 because the RAF couldn't actually find its targets, couldn't get, I think 10% of bombs got within 5 miles of the target with night bombing in 1942, so they figured the only thing they could actually hit was dormitory suburbs full of workers, women and children and grandparents and people in reserved occupations. And if they could be bombed out of their houses, well, that would be good for the British war effort. It would be bad for German morale, was the theory. And the theory was wrong, because the theory was Dewey's theory of frightfulness, which he cobbled together just after the First World War, and it suggested that if you flew over an enemy city and rained death and destruction on the civilians, they would rise up and they would demand that the government sue for peace. That was Dewey's theory of frightfulness, and it's never ever worked. There are people who think that Dewey's theory of frightfulness was proved by the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but the trouble is 110,000 people got cooked in one night in Tokyo, and the Japanese didn't sue for peace. 86,000 people got cooked in Hiroshima, and about 56,000 people got cooked in Nagasaki. The Japanese sued for peace because they were starving. The American Navy had sunk most of their merchant shipping. It's an island archipelago type nation, and they depended on shipping to move their food around. And their waters were full of mines and American submarines, and they were starving. That's why they'd had a gutful before they got atom bombed. They were exploring via their Moscow embassy attempts to surrender. So Dewey's theory of frightfulness, it's a disproved theory. It's a bit like phlogiston theory. It's been disproved. A lot of people thought a lot of it once upon a time. The Belgians who attacked the French civilians in the name of ISIL, Islamic State in Levant, because it's not just in Syria, it's in Iraq as well. They are just as much on the wrong side of Dewey's theory of frightfulness as are the Americans and the Australians and now the French. Because until last week, Australia was actually doing more bombing of ISIL than anybody except the Americans. We've got 6 Super Hornets over there. We've got 1,000 people in the RAAF operating 6 aeroplanes. We're spending $1.5 million a day bombing ISIL. We've got about 500 Special Air Service commandos camped between Baghdad and the ISIL front line, and the official story is they're teaching people to shoot. They're training the locals. But at the same time as we've got all those boots on the ground in Iraq, America is saying, oh, we've got no boots on the ground. And nobody's talking about who it is that's being flown out by a helicopter in the middle of the night and inserted in the boondocks and the hill country to use the laser target designator to paint the targets and call in the airstrikes which the Americans and the Australians and now the French are flying. So if, perchance, somebody who thinks that they're fighting for ISIL decides that, oh, look, there's that fool on the hill up there, he pays GST to the Australian government, he's supporting the financial side of Australia fielding an expeditionary force. Let's piss the Australian government off by shooting that fucking Greenie in his headlights while he's opening the gate. That will prove to Australia that they can't even safeguard their Fruit Loops out in the hills. I have no moral, ethical ground to stand on to complain about that, because it is, quote, my, unquote, military forces that are attacking his, unquote, military forces. In the case of the French civilians who got attacked, I haven't heard anybody yet suggest that any of those civilians sitting in cafes and football stadiums and theatres, I haven't heard of any of them having been people who have marched or protested against France's involvement in the war against ISIL. So if they haven't made any protest about their national military and what it's doing, and the enemies of their national military indulge in what's called counter value targeting, which means you don't go after your enemy at their strong points, you go after the enemy at their weak points where they don't want to be hit. You don't go running uphill against the machine guns where they're prepared to shoot you. You show up in their backyard and blow up their shithouse. Or attack their families, you know? It didn't make England surrender when London was blitzed. That's back to Duhay's theory of frightfulness. It doesn't bloody work. If you think about the French history of running around in the middle of the night and shooting at strangers and throwing explosives at them, you know, last time there was a mass casualty terrorist event in France was back in the 1950s or 60s, and 28 people got killed by a bunch of right-wing Fruit Loops, political activists, who were complaining against Algeria being handed back to the Algerians. They wanted Algérie Française, blow up a bus and kill 28 people. Before that, the French did a lot of running around shooting people in the middle of the night when they were shooting at the Germans. It was perfectly acceptable to run around and be a freedom fighter and attack people by surprise when they weren't ready for it. And when we're talking state-sponsored terrorism, France has no leg to stand on. The French naval intelligence sent a couple of frog-eating frogmen infiltrating commandos behind what they thought of as enemy lines into Auckland Harbour, and they planted bombs, and they sank a frigging sailing vessel, and they killed a civilian photographer. And France was not at war with New Zealand. New Zealand was not at war with France. The Rainbow Warrior was an irritation to the French naval intelligence, who were trying to practice with their atomic warheads on Mararoa Atoll, which they thought of as, and still do think of, as a French possession. You know what happened to those frog-eating commandos? They were captured, they were tried, they were sentenced, they were put in a New Zealand jail. European Union put pressure on New Zealand. They were repatriated back to France on condition that they complete serving their sentences, and France imprisoned them at a tourist resort in the South Pacific. They were frigging heroes to the French for being state-sponsored terrorists, commandos with explosives and guns, attacking civilians in a nation they weren't even at war with. In terms of moral gestalt, France has no grounds to stand on. They do this shit all the time. They decided to get involved in a war, and now they're getting upset when their enemy fights back. If you agree to fight, you agree to die. I'm a pacifist because I don't agree to die. I don't agree to play that game. The sooner all the Western countries disengage from ISIL so that ISIL can no longer tell their citizenry, oh, the reason that the school doesn't work, or the reason the sewage is broken down, the reason there's no electricity, the reason there's no water in the pipes, it's because of those wicked, evil infidels who are dropping bombs on us at night time. If there's no bombs at night time, if there's no Western action against ISIL, then ISIL has to function as a government and provide the services that its citizenry demands. The reason the citizenry apparently is putting up with ISIL is because they like ISIL better than they like the fucking puppets that the West used to have over their heads. That's kind of the only reason why they will be doing it. It's not necessarily the religious stuff, although that was perfectly designed to work in that area. You're not going to convert people in downtown Chicago to radical Islam and having a jihad, but it'll work in the Middle East. It will work in the Middle East. Yeah, you're either a pacifist or you're not, so shit or get off the pot. You can't be a little bit of a pacifist. You can't say some war is acceptable, because everybody involved in every war always thinks their war is the acceptable one and they're going to be on the winning side because God's on their side. You have to draw the line. Thou shalt not kill. Turn the other cheek. Judge not thy fellow human. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If you want somebody to attack your civilians, go and attack theirs. That's what Australia's been doing. It's what America's been doing. It's what England wants to do. The Parliament won't let their Prime Minister do it. France has now ramped up its bombing attacks on Syria because a fucking Belgium attacked Paris. It's a little bit like when America invaded Afghanistan because 19 Saudi Arabians, some Jordanians, and a Portuguese, as opposed to a hijacked aeroplane, has flown into two buildings and caused 3 buildings to burn down because of a waste paper basket. Ciao.